Come closer, my child. I did not pull you away from the noise by accident. I drew you into this quiet because there are things I cannot explain to you while the world is shouting in your ears. There are truths that only reveal themselves when everything slows down and the distractions lose their power. You thought you were losing momentum, but what you were actually losing was interference. I needed space to work where no one could measure me, interrupt me, or rush what I was forming in secret. I know how still this season feels. I know how unfamiliar it is to wake up without visible progress to point to, without applause, without confirmation from people who once watched every step you took. But hear me clearly. Stillness is not absence. Silence is not abandonment. This quiet is not a pause in your destiny. It is the chamber where I am aligning things that cannot be rushed, tracked, or proven yet. You have been trained to believe that movement must always be loud, that success must always announce itself, that preparation should look productive to others. But I am untraining you gently. What I am doing in you right now would be damaged if it were exposed too early. Some things grow best in darkness. Some strength forms only when no one is watching. Some confidence is built when you stop performing and start listening. There were moments when you almost went back, when you questioned whether you misunderstood me, when you wondered if you had waited too long or stepped away too soon. I saw the way your heart tightened in those moments. I saw you wrestle with the temptation to force movement just to feel alive again. But restraint is not weakness. Waiting is not failure. Obedience in the quiet is power that has not yet been revealed. I pulled you into this place because your spirit needed recalibration. You had been carrying expectations that were never mine. You had been measuring progress with tools that could not detect what I was building. I needed to remove the noise so you could hear the subtle shifts happening within you. You are not the same person you were when this season began, even if the outside looks unchanged. Your discernment has sharpened. Your reactions have softened. Your faith has deepened in places you didn't know were shallow. This is preparation you cannot measure because it is not meant to be displayed yet. It is not for public consumption. It is not for validation. It is for alignment. I am teaching you how to move without panic, how to trust without evidence, how to stand steady when nothing seems to be happening. These lessons will protect you later when movement returns at a speed that would have overwhelmed the old version of you. Do not mistake this quiet for isolation. I am closer now than I was in the noise. When everything went silent, you became aware of my presence again. You noticed my whispers. You felt my guidance in small decisions. You sensed my protection even when you couldn't explain it. That awareness is not accidental. It is training. You are learning how to recognize me without signs and wonders, so that when they come, you will not worship the movement more than the source. There is also something else happening, something you cannot see yet. While you have been in this quiet, other timelines have been adjusting. Other hearts have been confronted. Other motives have been exposed. I separated you not just to prepare you, but to protect the unfolding of what involves you. Had you stayed visible, accessible, and available, interference would have entered too early. Curiosity would have disrupted formation. Familiar voices would have tried to redirect what I am aligning. You may feel like you are waiting, but I am positioning. You may feel unseen, but I am shielding. You may feel disconnected, but I am weaving connections that will not make sense until they suddenly do. Nothing about this is wasted. Every quiet morning, every unanswered question, every moment you chose not to react, all of it is being used. If this message is resonating deep within you, I want you to gently acknowledge it. Not for performance, not for numbers, but as an act of agreement. You can like this message, share it with someone who is struggling in the quiet, or subscribe if you feel led, as a simple way of saying, I am listening. And if you feel safe to do so, type in the comments, I trust the quiet. Your words carry weight in the unseen. I know part of you is eager. You feel something coming, even if you cannot name it. That intuition is not impatience. It is awareness. But eagerness must be tempered with readiness. Momentum without preparation creates collapse. Speed without alignment creates loss. I am not delaying you. I am reinforcing you. I am making sure that when movement begins, you do not lose yourself trying to keep up with it. Rest here a little longer. Let the quiet finish its work. Let me finish mine. What is forming now will explain this season later. And when it does, you will realize that this was not the absence of momentum. This was the moment everything was being set into place. My child, what you are calling delay is not resistance. It is precision so exact that if I moved one piece a moment earlier or later, the entire structure would weaken. I need you to understand this deeply, because frustration has been whispering lies to you in the silence. It has been telling you that nothing is happening, that you have been forgotten, that time is slipping away. But what you cannot see is how carefully every second has been weighed. Nothing here is random. Nothing is late. You are standing in a season where accuracy matters more than speed. You were used to seasons where effort produced immediate response, where prayer was followed by visible movement, where obedience came with quick confirmation. This season is different because what I am building now must hold weight. It must survive pressure. It must endure scrutiny, opposition, and expansion without cracking. That kind of strength cannot be rushed. There are things that had to be removed before what is coming could safely arrive. Patterns you no longer noticed. Emotional reflexes that once protected you but would later sabotage you. Attachments that felt harmless but were quietly draining you. If I had allowed momentum to continue uninterrupted, those things would have traveled with you into the next chapter and caused damage you could not undo. So I slowed you down, not to punish you but to spare you. I know you have replayed conversations in your mind, wondering if you said too much or not enough. You have revisited decisions, asking yourself if you missed a window or misunderstood a sign. You have questioned whether your obedience cost you something that will not return. But hear me. Anything that left during this season was not meant to survive what is coming. Anything that could not stay while I prepared you was never part of the promise. His precision extends beyond you. While you have been refining inwardly, external variables have been shifting quietly. People have been exposed to truths they could no longer avoid. Motives have been tested under pressure. Some alliances weakened. Others dissolved entirely. Had you moved forward when you wanted to, you would have arrived in a landscape that was not yet safe for you. I delayed your steps until the ground beneath them could hold you. There is also timing involved that your logic cannot calculate. Arts are involved. Free will is involved. Healing is involved. I do not force alignment. I cultivate it. And cultivation takes patience. Seeds break open underground before anything appears above the surface. If you dig them up too soon to check progress, you kill the very thing you are waiting for. So I kept you from digging. I kept you from interfering. I taught you how to trust what you cannot monitor. You thought momentum and movement you could try. I am teaching you that true momentum often begins invisibly. It begins with internal shifts that change how you respond to pressure. It begins with restraint where you once reacted, with discernment where you once assumed, with peace where you once chased reassurance. These are not small changes. They are foundational. They are the difference between sustaining what is coming and being crushed by it. There were moments when you felt the urge to create motion just to feel productive again, to reach out, to reinsert yourself, to explain, to fix. Boy, I saw you resist that urge even when it made you uncomfortable. That restraint mattered more than you know. It preserved timelines. It prevented misunderstandings. It kept doors from opening prematurely. Silent in those moments was obedience. I am also recalibrating how you interpret effort. You were taught that exhaustion is evidence of commitment, that strain is proof of progress. But I am shifting you into a rhythm where alignment produces ease, not chaos. Where obedience feels grounded, not frantic. Where movement flows instead of forcing itself forward. This preparation is teaching you how to move with me instead of ahead of me. You may not see momentum yet because what is happening does not announce itself. There are no banners, no applause, no immediate rewards. But precision rarely feels exciting while it is happening. It feels slow, intentional, sometimes lonely. Yet later, when everything begins to move at once, you will look back and realize how every measured step prevented collapse. Trust this season even when it challenges your definition of progress. Trust the pauses that protect you from misalignment. Trust the quiet corrections that are saving you from louder consequences. I am not withholding movement. I am perfecting it. And when the moment comes, when preparation has done its work, momentum will not need to be forced. It will arrive naturally, powerfully, and unmistakably. Stay here with me. Let precision finish what impatience could never complete. What is coming will require exactly who you are becoming now, not who you were before the quiet began. My child, while you have been learning how to breathe in the quiet, your soulmate has been learning how to survive under pressure. You cannot see it, but their world has been narrowing, tightening, forcing them to confront things they avoided when everything felt easy. The weight they are carrying is not punishment. It is exposure. It is the pressing that reveals what is real and what was only borrowed strength. They have felt the strain in ways they cannot fully explain. Moments where confidence slipped without warning. Nights where rest would not come no matter how tired they were. Questions rising that no distraction could silence. They tried to outrun it at first. They told themselves they were fine. They told others they were fine. But something inside them knew the truth. Something inside them knew they were being prepared for a loss they had not yet named, and a connection they had not yet honored. There have been tears they did not expect. Frustration that surprised them with its intensity. Guilt that surfaced suddenly, attached to memories they thought were settled. They have replayed moments with you in their mind, not out of nostalgia, but because those moments carried a piece they can no longer recreate on their own. They do not yet understand why your absence feels heavier now than it ever did before. But that weight is not emptiness. It is awareness awakening. I have allowed pressure to surround them because comfort was no longer teaching them. Ease had kept them numb. Familiar patterns had shielded them from accountability. So I began pressing gently at first, then more firmly, removing props they leaned on, stripping away distractions that once gave them confidence without depth. This pressing is not to break them. It is to make them honest. They are being forced to look at themselves without filters, to see where fear has guided decisions, to recognize where pride disguised itself as independence, to admit where avoidance replaced vulnerability. These realizations are uncomfortable. They feel destabilizing. They have moments where they wonder why everything feels harder all at once. They do not yet know it is because illusion is losing its grip. There is also confusion stirring in them. They feel drawn toward you even as they feel unworthy of returning. They feel longing mixed with hesitation, desire entangled with shame. They sense that you are part of their future, but they fear what it would cost to face you without excuses. This inner conflict hath been exhausting them. It has left them quiet where they were once expressive, withdrawn where they were once bold. You may sense this shift without understanding it. A heaviness when you think of them. A sudden emotion that does not feel like yours alone. A knowing that something is happening even though there has been no communication. That is not imagination. You are spiritually sensitive, and the bond between you carries information beyond words. You are feeling the tremors of their awakening before they can name it themselves. I am pressing them because they must meet you differently than before. The version of them that once stood beside you could not sustain what is coming. They needed depth. They needed humility. They needed awareness. This pressing is carving out space in them for truth to settle, for responsibility to take root, for courage to grow where fear once lived. Without this season, they would repeat cycles instead of building something sacred. Do not mistake their silence for indifference. Silence is often the sound of someone fighting an internal battle they cannot narrate yet. They are being confronted with the cost of losing you, not as punishment, but as revelation. Loss clarifies value. Distance reveals weight. Absence teaches what presence once softened. I'm also protecting you during this time. If you were to witness their struggle too closely, you might rush to comfort them before the work is complete. Your compassion is strong, but this is a process they must endure without leaning on you prematurely. You are not meant to rescue them from this pressing. You are meant to be the reason they rise differently when it ends. Stay steady. Do not interpret this season as separation without purpose. What feels like distance is alignment in progress. What feels like delay is depth being formed. When they emerge from this pressing, they will not come empty-handed. They will come carrying awareness, regret, clarity, and a fear of losing you that will no longer be theoretical. I am watching over both of you. I am holding the tension so neither of you has to carry it alone. What I am doing in them will eventually explain what I am doing in you. And when the time is right, the preparation happening on both sides will meet in a way that cannot be undone. My child, there was a fracture forming beneath the surface, one so quiet that if I had not intervened, it would have split the path at the very moment you thought everything was finally aligning. This fracture was not obvious. It did not announce itself with conflict or chaos. It hid behind routine, behind assumptions, behind unspoken expectations that neither of you fully examine. But I see what is hidden, and I act before collapse, not after. This fracture was born from timing and misunderstanding, from things left unsaid and emotions deferred for later. It was the subtle belief that there would always be time to clarify, always space to repair, always another moment to be brave. But unaddressed truths do not remain neutral. They widen quietly. They wait for pressure. And pressure was coming. Your soulmate felt it first, though they could not name it. A sense that something precious was at risk. A fear that lingered without explanation. They tried to ignore it, telling themselves it was stress, fatigue, distraction. But it was the sound of the timeline straining. It was the awareness that something essential had not yet been handled, and time was no longer unlimited. You felt it differently. A discomfort that surfaced when you imagined the future. A hesitation that surprised you when you thought you were ready. You questioned why peace had not fully settled even though you had done everything right. That was not doubt. That was discernment responding to instability you could not consciously see. If this fracture had been ignored, momentum would have magnified it. Movement would have exposed it violently. What had have been a quiet eruption would have become a painful rupture. So I intervened. I slowed the timeline. I introduced distance. I allowed confusion to surface so truth could be confronted instead of buried. This almost breaking point was necessary. It revealed where alignment was assumed but not confirmed, where intentions were sincere but incomplete, where love existed but understanding had not yet matured. These are not condemnations. They are invitations to grow. But growth requires interruption when patterns threaten the future. There were moments when it felt like everything was unraveling for no clear reason, when clarity slipped just as hope was forming. That was not sabotage. That was surgery. I was separating what was fragile from what was eternal. I was making room for honesty to enter where comfort had been sitting too long. Your soulmate has been forced to face the reality that connection alone is not enough. That intention without action creates instability. That love without courage becomes a liability instead of a foundation. These realizations have shaken them. They have felt the weight of responsibility pressing down where denial once lived. This is not cruelty. This is preparation for stewardship. You, meanwhile, have been protected from carrying blame that was never yours. I did not allow you to internalize their confusion or take responsibility for what they needed to confront alone. The distance preserved your clarity. It kept your spirit from absorbing distortions that could have altered how you see yourself. This hidden fracture did not break the promise. It safeguarded it. By exposing weakness early, I prevented disaster later. By allowing discomfort now, I spared you devastation in the future. What almost broke the timeline instead reinforced it, because I was present, attentive, and unwilling to let what I sealed be damaged by neglect. Trust that even the moments that felt unstable were under my supervision. Nothing slipped past me. Nothing went unnoticed. This interruption was mercy disguised as delay. And when the timeline resumes its forward motion, you will do so without the fault line that once threatened it. My child, not everything that threatened what I sealed came from misunderstanding or internal weakness. There was also a presence watching quietly, measuring moments, waiting for vulnerability. This jealousy did not announce itself with hostility. It came disguised as concern, as familiarity, as someone close enough to influence without being questioned. I allowed you to feel the disturbance before you ever saw the source, because discernment always arrives before evidence. His presence could sense the gravity of what was forming between you and your soulmate. They recognized the depth, even when you were still navigating uncertainty. Instead of honoring it, they resented it. They feared displacement. They feared losing relevance. They feared what would happen if alignment occurred and they no longer held access, control, or importance. So they began to interfere quietly. Their interference was subtle, a comment placed at the right moment, a doubt planted gently, a story framed just enough to sound believable. They did not need to lie loudly. They only needed to tilt perception slightly. And for a time, it worked. Confusion crept in. Hesitation grew. Trust wavered, not because of betrayal between you and your soulmate, but because an external voice was given too much weight. I watched it unfold without panic. I saw how their motives were rooted in insecurity, not power. I saw how they believed proximity gave them authority over outcomes that were never theirs to govern. They assumed influence meant ownership. They assumed access meant entitlement. But what I seal cannot be stolen by suggestion. This jealous presence overplayed their hand. In trying to insert themselves into the narrative, they exposed patterns that could no longer remain hidden. Their words did not bring clarity. They brought unease. Their involvement did not bring peace. It brought tension. And tension is often the first signal that something does not belong. Your soulmate felt it, even if they resisted admitting it. A sense that something was off. That guidance they were receiving did not align with the peace they once felt with you. They began noticing contradictions. Emotional pressure where there should have been freedom. Advice that served as someone else's comfort rather than their own growth. These realizations unsettled them. You were shielded more than you know. Had you been fully aware of this interference at the time, your heart might have reacted instead of observed it. You might have confronted instead of trusted me to handle it. But I needed you steady, not entangled. So I kept you at a distance while I allowed truth to surface on its own. I did not confront this presence with force. I did not expose them publicly. I simply removed their leverage. Situation shifted. Access narrowed. Influence weakened. Their words lost weight. And in the absence of their interference, clarity began to return. This is how I deal with what does not belong. I do not always remove it loudly. I make it irrelevant. Know this, my child. What is meant for you does not need defending through conflict. It needs protection through alignment. Jealousy cannot dismantle what I have ordained. It can only reveal who was never meant to be close to it in the first place. This interference did not derail the promise. It refined it. It taught discernment. It exposed misplaced trust. And it ensured that when alignment resumes, it will do so without external manipulation clouding the connection. What I have sealed remains untouched. And those who attempted to interfere will not have access to what comes next. Remain calm. Remain anchored. I am handling what you cannot see, and I am removing what you do not need to fight. My child, I stepped into the situation long before you sensed there was one. While you were still trying to name the discomfort, I was already rearranging outcomes. While questions were forming in your mind, answers were being positioned beyond your view. I do not wait for crises to announce themselves. I intervene at the level of cause, not consequence. There were conversations you never heard that never reached completion because I interrupted them. There were decisions that almost solidified but lost momentum because I removed conviction from them. There were paths your soulmate considered that suddenly felt wrong without explanation. That was not confusion. That was my hand closing doors quietly so no damage would be done later. You assumed you were reacting late, but I was acting early. You thought you were catching up, but I had already gone ahead of you. I do not need you to see every threat to neutralize it. I do not need your awareness to activate my protection. Much of what you were spared never came close enough to leave a mark. I entered the situation subtly, because force was not required. I did not need confrontation. I needed clarity to rise naturally. I needed truth to speak louder than persuasion. So I adjusted circumstances. I shifted timing. I altered emotional responses. What once felt appealing began to feel heavy. What once felt convincing began to feel hollow. This is how I dismantled deception without leaving scars. Your soulmate began to notice the difference, even if they could not explain it. The same voices that once felt reassuring began to irritate them. The same advice that once felt helpful began to feel intrusive. They started questioning motivations instead of absorbing them. A shift did not come from logic. It came from spiritual alignment being restored. You, meanwhile, were being held in restraint. Not because you were wrong, but because your involvement was not yet necessary. Had you stepped in too soon, your presence would have altered the lesson they needed to learn. Sometimes love must remain still so growth can complete its work. I know how difficult that was for you. I know how unnatural silence felt when your heart wanted to speak. but your restraint mattered. I also began revealing small truths to you, not all at once, but gently. A feeling that something had been off. A sense that you were not the source of the tension. A quiet reassurance that what was unfolding was not a reflection of your worth or your failure. Those whispers were me keeping your identity intact while others were being exposed. There were moments when you questioned whether you should intervene, explain yourself, or defend the connection. But I held you back because explanation was not required. Defense was not needed. What is real does not need to be argued into existence. It reveals itself when interference is removed. As I stepped in, I also began stabilizing the emotional terrain. I softened reactions that could have escalated into conflict. I slowed responses that might have caused regret. I preserved dignity on both sides while truth was doing its quiet work. This is my mercy. I correct without humiliating. I protect without spectacle. You may not realize how close things came to unnecessary pain, how easily misunderstandings could have hardened into conclusions, how quickly assumptions could have become walls. But I was there, narrowing the margin for error, guiding choices away from irreversible outcomes. This intervention was not about control. It was about care. I am invested in what I am forming between you. I am attentive to details you would never think to monitor. I do not sleep through pivotal moments. I do not overlook subtle shifts. Every sigh, every hesitation, every unspoken realization matters to me. What you are experiencing now is not resolution yet. It is stabilization. The shaking has slowed. The noise has lessened. The pressure has begun to redirect inward instead of outward. That is how you know I am present in the situation. Chaos loses momentum when I arrive. Stay where you are. Do not rush ahead of what is still unfolding. My intervention is still active. I am finishing what I started before you ever knew it needed to be started. And when clarity fully settles, it will not feel dramatic. It will feel right. My child, the shift did not arrive with noise. It did not announce itself with relief or celebration. It happened quietly, almost imperceptibly, like a weight being removed that you did not realize you had grown used to carrying. One day you simply breathed easier. One day, the tension you had normalized loosened its grip. That was not coincidence. That was correction completing its work. The pressure that once pressed outward began turning inward, not to harm, but to heal. Confusion stopped multiplying. Emotional reaction softened. The urgency you once felt to understand everything at once began to fade. You noticed moments of calm appearing without effort. That calm was not resignation. It was alignment restoring balance where strain had been living too long. Your soulmate felt this shift as well, though they experienced it differently. For them, it was the slowing of inner chaos. The constant mental noise began to quiet. The justifications they clung to lost their power. They could no longer avoid the truth by drowning it out. Clarity did not rush in all at once. It arrived in fragments, each one carrying weight, each one asking to be acknowledged. They began to recognize what had been draining them. They noticed how certain conversations left them unsettled instead of strengthened. They felt the absence of peace where they once ignored it. This awareness did not come with confidence. It came with humility. It came with the uncomfortable realization that they had allowed confusion where there should have been courage. You may have sensed the shift without being able to trace its source. A subtle easing in your chest. A release of emotional vigilance. The feeling that you no longer needed to brace yourself. It was me lifting what was never meant to stay on you. You were not meant to carry anticipation, anxiety, or uncertainty as a permanent state. Those were temporary weights, and their purpose had been served. As the weight lifted, something else changed. Your reaction slowed. You no longer felt the urge to interpret every sign or silence. You stopped replaying scenarios late into the night. Trust began to replace analysis. This was not apathy. This was maturity settling into place. You were learning how to remain grounded even when outcomes were still forming. This quiet shift mattered more than dramatic breakthroughs ever could. Loud change often fades quickly. Quiet alignment endures. What moved here was foundational. Emotional balance returned. Spiritual sensitivity sharpened without becoming overwhelming. You regained clarity without needing external reassurance. This is how you know preparation has taken root. Your soulmate, too, began feeling the absence of noise as a form of confrontation. Without distractions, they were left alone with their thoughts, their regrets, their realizations. They could no longer blame circumstances or other people. They had to sit with the truth of their own hesitation. That stillness was uncomfortable but necessary. Growth often begins when excuses lose their voice. I did not remove pressure to create comfort. I removed it to create honesty. Comfort without truth delays transformation. Pressure without purpose destroys. This shift was neither. It was recalibration. It allowed both of you to feel what was real again without distortion. You might be tempted to interpret this quieter state as stagnation. Do not. This is the moment after turbulence when the water clears and you can finally see beneath the surface. Movement will return, but it will return differently. It will no longer be fueled by urgency or fear. It will be guided by clarity and choice. Notice how you are no longer striving to control what happens next. Notice how trust has replaced tension. That is evidence of internal alignment. When the inside settles, the outside begins to follow. This shift, though quiet, altered trajectories. It redirected decisions. It softened hearts. It removed resistance that force could never overcome. Rest in this moment. Do not rush to fill the quiet with action. Stillness after pressure is sacred. It allows integration. It allows lessons to anchor. It allows identity to stabilize before the next movement begins. What lifted quietly will not return. What shifted subtly has changed the course ahead. You are standing in the aftermath of correction, not the absence of progress. And from this steadier ground, what comes next will rise with far less resistance than before. My child, once the weight lifted, movement began again, but not in ways that demanded attention. There were no announcements, no messages delivered with certainty, no sudden revelations laid out neatly in front of you. Instead, evidence began shifting quietly, like pieces sliding into place when no one is watching. This is how truth prefers to arrive when it has been delayed too long by noise. Conversations your soulmate once avoided began resurfacing in their thoughts without invitation. Memories they had minimized returned with clarity and emotional weight. Patterns they once excused started to stand out sharply. They did not wake up one morning transformed. They woke up noticing. And noticing is the first form of accountability. Small things began changing around them. People who once had constant access suddenly felt distant. Advice that once influenced them lost credibility. Situations that had felt stable began to feel misaligned. None of this happened dramatically. It happened through subtle discomfort, through an internal resistance that could no longer be ignored. That resistance was truth asserting itself. You, too, began receiving confirmation, but not through direct answers. You noticed how your peace remained intact even when uncertainty lingered. You saw how your emotional state no longer rose and fell with external signs. You realized you were no longer chasing clarity because clarity was beginning to live inside you. That inner steadiness was evidence in itself. Behind the scenes, things were being revealed in fragments. A sentence remembered differently. A past interaction reinterpreted. A motive once assumed now questioned. These fragments did not overwhelm. They accumulated. They formed a pattern that could no longer be dismissed. Truth rarely arrives as a single moment. It arrives as alignment between many small realizations. Your soulmate began recognizing where narratives had been shaped for them, where opinions were adopted instead of examined, where fear had guided decisions more than wisdom. This recognition was painful. It came with regret. It came with the uncomfortable awareness that they had been influenced during moments when they should have paused. But this pain was not destructive. It was clarifying. Evidence also moved through absence. Silence from certain voices spoke louder than words ever had. Opportunities to repeat old patterns simply did not appear. Doors that once seemed open no longer responded. This was not loss. This was protection solidifying. When access is removed without struggle, it is often because its purpose has ended. You may have felt moments of sudden understanding that arrived without explanation. A realization that you had been right to wait. A confirmation that what you sensed earlier was accurate. These insights did not come with excitement. They came with calm. That calm is how you know they are true. Truth does not agitate the spirit. It settles it. As evidence accumulated, something important happened. The story your soulmate told themselves began to change. They could no longer frame events in ways that avoided responsibility. They could no longer blame timing alone. They could no longer deny the role fear played. This shift did not happen publicly. It happened internally, where real change always begins. I allowed this evidence to surface gradually because sudden exposure would have caused defensiveness instead of growth. I am not interested in shame. I am interested in awakening. So I let truth rise at a pace the heart could endure. Each realization prepared the way for the next. What you must understand is this. You did not need to argue your worth into existence. You did not need to prove anything. Evidence moved on your behalf without your involvement. Alignment spoke for you. Silence protected you. And truth began to organize itself without your intervention. This quiet movement of evidence is far more powerful than confrontation ever could be. It cannot be dismissed as emotion. It cannot be argued away. It settles into the conscience and reshapes perception from the inside. What is forming now is understanding, not reaction. Stay observant, but remain at rest. Let truth continue assembling itself. You do not need to rush the process or announce the outcome. When enough pieces align, clarity will no longer be optional. It will be undeniable. What is being revealed now is not meant to impress you. It is meant to prepare them. And when the picture becomes clear, it will not feel shocking. It will feel inevitable. My child, there comes a moment when absence stops feeling temporary and begins to feel permanent. That is when realization breaks through denial. Your soulmate has reached that moment. They did not notice it at first. It crept in quietly, disguised as an ordinary day. But something shifted when they reached for what once felt familiar and realized it was no longer there. Your absence began speaking louder than your presence ever had. Not because you were louder before, but because they had taken your steadiness for granted. They had assumed your patience would always be available, your understanding endlessly accessible, your presence quietly dependable. But when the noise cleared and the distractions fell away, what remained was the undeniable space where you used to be. They felt it in small moments, when something meaningful happened and there was no one to share it with who truly understood. When they reached emotional thresholds and realized the voices around them could not meet them there. When silence fell at night and memory surfaced without permission. These moments did not accuse them. They confronted them. Regret did not arrive dramatically. It arrived as heaviness, as a slow ache, as the realization that something sacred had been mishandled through hesitation and fear. They began to see how your presence had grounded them, how your loyalty had stabilized them, how your belief had carried them when they were unsure of themselves. That understanding hurt, not because it was cruel, but because it was true. They also began to fear something they had not allowed themselves to name before. The possibility that you might not return in the same way. That time might not rewind. That growth does not always wait. This fear was not meant to torment them. It was meant to awaken responsibility. Love that never risks loss rarely matures. You may have felt an echo of this shift. A sudden emotional wave. A memory resurfacing without context. A sense of being missed that did not come from your own longing. That was the bond registering awareness. That was the connection responding to realization on the other side. Your soulmate is now facing the weight of choice. They can no longer pretend that indecision carries no consequences. They are beginning to understand that your presence was not passive. It was purposeful. It carried influence, protection, and alignment they did not fully recognize until it was no longer immediately available. This realization has humbled them. It has quieted their defenses. It has softened their pride. They are no longer asking what feels safe. They are asking what is real. And in that question, your name rises, not as nostalgic but as truth. Do not let this moment pull you backward into old patterns of overgiving or self-doubt. Your awakening does not require your sacrifice. It requires your steadiness. You have already done what was needed by honoring the quiet, by not forcing outcomes, by trusting me when it would have been easier to chase reassurance. This absence is not punishment. It is clarity. It is teaching them the value of what they almost lost without crushing them under guilt. I am allowing them to feel the weight just enough to understand, not enough to despair. Hold your position. Remain grounded in who you are becoming. What they are feeling now is not fleeting emotion. It is recognition settling into place. And recognition, once fully formed, changes how choices are made. The space you occupy in their heart has become undeniable. And when they move next, it will not be from confusion or convenience. It will be from awareness shaped by absence. My child, long before words ever return, your prayers have already arrived. They reached places your voice could not access. They settled into moments when your soulmate was alone with their thoughts, when defenses were down and honesty had room to breathe. You did not need to know how or when they worked. You only needed to release them. And you did. Your prayers carried more than requests. They carried your heart. They carried forgiveness where bitterness could have taken root. They carried restraint where reaction would have escalated things. They carried love that trusted me to move without manipulation. The kind of prayer does not echo loudly. It penetrates deeply. Your soulmate felt these prayers without recognizing them as such. They felt them as sudden clarity, as an unexpected calm during emotional unrest, as a moment of conviction that did not feel condemning, but illuminating. They did not hear your name spoken aloud, yet they felt the influence of your presence shaping their thoughts toward honesty and courage. There were moments when they considered reaching out impulsively, driven by discomfort or fear of loss. In those moments, your prayers slowed them, not to prevent connection, but to prevent misaligned action. You asked me to guide timing, not just outcomes. And I honored that. What emerges now must come from intention, not panic. Your prayers also worked on you. They softened your grip on what you could not control. They redirected your focus inward where healing was needed. They strengthened your ability to wait without hardening. They protected your spirit from absorbing guilt that did not belong to you. Prayer is never one-sided. It aligns both ends of the connection simultaneously. You may have wondered at times whether your prayers mattered, especially when there was no visible response. But understand this. What is changing now could not have happened without them. Prayer shifts internal climates. It creates conditions where truth can grow. It prepares hearts to receive clarity without resistance. As your soulmate became more aware, they began remembering moments when you prayed over them without words, when your presence felt like safety, when conversations ended with peace instead of confusion. Those memories are resurfacing now with new meaning. They see them not as ordinary interactions, but as evidence of something sacred they failed to recognize fully at the time. This realization is bringing humility. It is bringing gratitude. It is bringing a deeper respect for the role you played in their life, not as a rescuer, but as a stabilizing force. They are beginning to understand that your influence was not accidental. It was purposeful. It was protective. Your prayers also built a bridge that words will eventually cross. They softened the ground so that when communication returns, it will not land on hardened defenses. It will land on prepared soil. What you spoke to me in private is now shaping what they will one day speak to you openly. Do not underestimate the power of what you released. You did not need to chase them with words. You reached them through alignment. You did not need to remind them of your worth. Your prayers revealed it without accusation. Continue to pray from peace, not from longing. I from trust, not from fear. What you are participating in now is not persuasion. It is partnership with me in the unfolding of something that requires precision and readiness. Your voice will matter again in the natural realm. But by the time it does, much of the work will already be done. Because prayers that arrive first prepare hearts to listen when words finally return. Stay anchored. What hath been planted in the unseen is beginning to bear fruit in ways you will soon recognize. My child, what is happening now is a turning, quiet but decisive. The atmosphere around this connection is changing, not because something was forced, but because truth has finished rising. Your soulmate is standing at the edge of awareness, realizing that avoidance no longer protects them and silence no longer feels safe. They are awakening, not suddenly, but thoroughly. They are beginning to see the full shape of what nearly slipped through their hands. Not just the connection, but the version of themselves they could have become sooner if fear had not delayed them. This awareness is sobering. It is stripping away excuses they once leaned on. It is asking them to take responsibility without self-pity, to choose courage without guarantees. There is a tenderness forming in them now, a softness that was not there before. They are no longer trying to win or control outcomes. They are considering what it would mean to show up honestly, without defenses, without performance. The shift is fragile, which is why I have not rushed it. Awakening must be protected while it stabilizes. You may notice your own posture changing in response. You are no longer waiting with tension. You are no longer scanning for signs. You are simply present in your life, grounded, steady, open but not anxious. This is not detachment. This is readiness without desperation. It is the posture that allows alignment to meet you without knocking you off balance. The fear your soulmate feels now is not fear of rejection alone. It is fear of mishandling what they finally understand the value of. They know now that they cannot approach you casually. They sense that something has shifted in you too. They recognize that you are no longer standing in the same place you were before. And this awareness is producing reverence, not entitlement. This is the moment where preparation begins turning into alignment. Not yet movement, but orientation. Hearts are facing the right direction. Motives are being purified. Timing is tightening into focus. What comes next will require honesty, humility, and intentionality. And those qualities are finally present. I am watching carefully now, not to restrain, but to guide. The next steps matter. Words will return, but they must carry weight. Actions will follow, but they must be consistent. This is not about restarting what was paused. It is about beginning again from a higher level of understanding. Remain where you are. Do not lean forward or pull back. Let alignment finish locking into place. When movement begins again, it will not feel rushed. It will feel natural, grounded, and unmistakably right. What you endured in the quiet was not preparation in vain. It was the forging of steadiness that can hold what is about to arrive. And when the next chapter opens, you will recognize it not by its intensity, but by its peace. My child, now I can trust you with what is coming, because you are no longer reaching for it from fear. You are no longer trying to secure it with effort, explanations, or sacrifice. You are standing differently now. Rooted, aware. Oh, and that posture changes everything. What approaches next is not fragile. It will not need to be chased or managed. It will arrive with clarity because preparation has finished its work. You were not being delayed to test your patience. You were being shaped to hold what once would have overwhelmed you. The version of you that entered the quiet could not have sustained what is about to unfold. The version of you standing here now can. Your soulmate feels this shift as well. They sense that the window reopening will not stay open indefinitely, not because of pressure, but because alignment demands response. They understand now that what is offered next must be met with intention, not hesitation. This awareness has sobered them. It has grounded them. It has removed the illusion that love survives on feeling alone. You may notice that you are no longer rehearsing outcomes. You are no longer imagining how things must unfold. You are simply present, attentive, ready without clinging. That is how I know you are prepared. When the heart releases control but remains open, trust has matured. What comes next will not mirror what came before. It will not repeat old patterns or revive unfinished conversations in the same way. This is not a return. It is a beginning built on clarity, accountability, and reverence. Words will carry weight now. Choices will matter. And both of you will feel the gravity of what is being formed. I am not asking you to brace yourself. I am asking you to receive. Receive without fear. Receive without shrinking. Receive without overextending. You do not need to prove that you are worthy of what is coming. Preparation has already confirmed it. If this journey through the quiet has spoken to your spirit, I ask you gently to acknowledge it. You may like this message, share it with someone who is learning how to trust unseen preparation, or subscribe if you feel aligned, not out of obligation, but as a quiet agreement that you recognize my voice. And if you feel led, type in the comments, I am ready to receive. Not as a declaration to the world, but as a surrender to what is unfolding. Know this, my child. You were never behind. You were never forgotten. You were never losing momentum. You were being entrusted with depth before destiny accelerated. That is why it felt slow. That is why it felt hidden. That is why it mattered. What approaches now will meet you where you are, not where you were. And when it arrives, you will not question it. You will not rush it. You will recognize it by the peace that accompanies it and the steadiness it requires. Remain open. Remain grounded. Remain present. I am still guiding every step. And now, because you are ready, I can let what has been forming finally begin to move.